Ben, we have an email here with the subject of should full tuition scholarship recipients assume they are the big fish? You want to tackle this one?
Yeah, my gut reaction says yes.
Yeah. I mean, not like take it for granted. You're still going to have to work your ass off. But
Yeah.
if you're one of, let's say the school gives full rides to 20% of the class, you can assume that you have a higher LSAT GPA combo than 80% of the class. You're certainly starting with some advantage, but all right, why don't you, maybe there's more to it here.
Sure.
What's the
Okay.
email say?
Hey guys, exclamation point. I know you like to advocate for the benefits of being a big fish in a small pond rather than the opposite. The argument makes sense considering the competitive nature of law school grading and firm hiring. However, I'm interested in hearing your opinions on how networking could factor into this situation. My line of thinking is that being around a bunch of rock stars and forming long term connections with people who go on to do amazing things is beneficial, even if these rock stars are crushing you under the curve. Not that this is necessarily sufficient to compensate. There is evidence that going to a school on a full tuition scholarship increases one's chances of performing near the top of the class, given the predictive ability of a combined GPA and LSAT score. But these two elements' prediction of performance is actually fairly weak and leaves significant wiggle room for students to underperform and not be the big fish that they thought they would be. Wait, these performance predictions are weak? I I wasn't under that impression.
I think that, I mean, they are certainly not like 100%, right? It's not
They're not
guaranteed.
100%, but I think it's like 75, which is
I
pretty
don't know
good.
what it actually is. We
That's
can
what
look
I
at
got
the
from that
data.
one video. Yeah.
We can look
Com-
at the data on it. I mean, it is, I will say that it's clear, so you can say it's fairly weak and leaves significant wiggle room. Yeah, if you don't do the work and you don't show up and you just totally fuck up your exams for whatever reason, then you're not going to be a big fish anymore. But you know, more often than not, I think you are going to kind of finish your scholarship ranking is going to be pretty tightly related to your class ranking. I
okay.
would say that most of the time, but you
I
could still
agree.
call that weak.
I don't know. I wouldn't say that's weak. I'd say it's predictive. So, but
It's hey, well, we're talking about like necessarily subjective terms here, right?
yeah.
What does it mean to be fairly weak? I don't know. We're going to argue about that. So who knows what G really means here?
What if I assume I will be at or below the median as half my class is defined to be? This hypothetical might suggest it's worth paying a bit for the security of a school that places more than 50% of its class in big law and federal clerkships, assuming these are goals, as opposed to going for free to a school that doesn't. I don't think that the differences in schools are that significant. I don't think we're talking about a bottom feeder school and a top ranked school that's going to have that much of an impact. We're talking about a few schools down on the ranking, which often
Exactly.
means absolutely nothing.
Exactly. Yeah. You're comparing it's never Hastings versus Stanford. That's not a thing. It's
Yeah.
always uh Hastings, it's always I would say Hastings versus Berkeley, but that's also like too huge of a leap. That's
Mhm.
never what you're comparing. You're comparing Hastings to UC Davis. And both of those are fine regional schools. They both have some big law placement. And one of the schools is going to give you a scholarship and the other one isn't. And you're an idiot if you don't take the scholarship. I
And
mean,
look, if you're comparing Hastings to Stanford anyway, that's because you probably didn't apply broadly enough. What'd you do? You
right,
only applied to two schools and now you have a full ride and then you have nothing somewhere else.
right. If you did it correctly, if you were in at Stanford and you'd have a full ride at Hastings, but you'd also have all kinds of intermediate options, including probably Berkeley, where you can start making some or and like UCLA. uh, USC, lots of schools that are just outside the top 14 that probably also would give you a full ride if you're capable of getting into the truly elite schools. One thing that what if how do you feel about this, Ben? What if I assume I will be at or below the median as half of my class is defined to be? I have a reaction to that.
Well, that's the very assumption that we're making to argue that you should go to the lower ranked school, that you're less likely to be in that situation. I mean, that's kind of like undermining the point, I think, in
It
some
seems
ways.
so fatalistic. Like I'm just going to go to law school and just plan on being in the bottom half of my class.
Yeah.
Like you're
If you're going to be
what?
at the bottom half of your class for a school that gave you a full ride, well, then you're going to, what are you going to do at a higher ranked school?
Finish at the very bottom of the class, which if we are literally talking about Stanford Law School,
It might
you
not
know,
matter, but most cases we're not talking about Stanford. Even if you're
no.
talking about Berkeley, that's a problem. That's a problem to be at the bottom of Berkeley and I don't know, at the bottom half of some other
Yeah,
school.
I don't think the outcomes can be very good for the very bottom, like 10% of the class at Berkeley.
Nope.
I don't I don't think that's great. If you're comparing Berkeley to Hastings, which again, I think there should be other intermediate options if you had applied to a proper like spectrum of schools. But if you are literally comparing the full ride at Hastings to no scholarship at Berkeley, I think you'd be dumb to go in and be like, oh, I'll just go to Berkeley and finish at the bottom of my class and hope that the reputation of Berkeley carries you through. I would much rather have you go excel at Hastings and not pay for law school. And the thing that this email really seems to miss more than anything else is that like half the people who go to law school just don't practice law ever. Either they wash out, they drop out of school, they wash out of school for some reason, they decide to go some other path at some point, they graduate, but they don't practice like me,
Mm-hmm.
or they fail the bar, or they fail to get employment.
Yep.
And the reason why we constantly yell about don't pay for law school is that we each have like hundreds of well-meaning alums of our LSAT programs who have gone to law school, paid for law school, and then decided not to practice or not been able to practice
Yeah.
because of some combination of factors. And if you do that and you have minimal or zero debt, you're not that bad off. If you do that and you have six figures of debt, you've ruined your financial future. That's the bigger risk. It's like G's worried about going to a lower ranked school for free and still not excelling academically.
And missing out on the networking opportunities.
But you're going there for free already.
Yeah.
And if you go to some fancy school and you pay fancy prices, well, that network isn't going to do shit for you if you fail the bar. And it's not going to do shit for you if you decide you don't want to practice. And it's not going to do shit for you if you finish so far down your class that you don't even get those OCI interviews or those internships or whatever. There's a gradient here, right? And so he's like, well, but what about schools that send more than half their class to Big Law? Yeah, okay, but you still have to finish in the top, whatever that is. Like if it's 70%, then you do still have to finish in the top 70% of your class. There's a whole bottom 30%, which if you're there paying full price, you're more likely to be in that bottom 30%, which won't even get those opportunities.
Yeah. I want to talk about this networking gradient a little bit. I was just thinking about it. I'd never really thought too much about this, but I suspect that between most schools, the networking benefits of going alongside, with people who are more likely to be successful it's just on a continuum, right? So again, it's the same problem. It's like we're not talking about a big change from one school to the next, except I bet that networking benefit goes up exponentially at the very last schools, right? Like the killers that end up going to Harvard, Yale, Stanford, yeah, being connected with them seems like if you're going to get a benefit, it's going to be exponentially greater than, say, just a few schools down. But again, I don't know if it's worth the risk. Are you going to pay $100,000 for that benefit?
Yeah, and even then, I mean, are there not rock stars at University of Michigan Law School?
Yeah,
There
I
are
mean, that's what I'm
incredible
wondering. It's
rock
like,
stars.
like the Pareto principle. It's like
The 80-20
the
thing.
80 or not, not 595 or
Right.
whatever. It's like
Right.
most of the opportunities go to some of these folks that are like
Yeah.
out of this world, like being connected with Obama or something like that, right? Like,
Oh, sure. If that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
well, that's what I'm
And
wondering. Because how many people are like, how many rock stars are you getting out of Harvard versus out of even just like 5 schools down? You're
yeah.
getting for sure. You're getting rock stars out of those tops 10
I,
schools, but
I just again, it's not like Stanford has all the rock stars and Berkeley has none.
oh,
That's just not
I
how it
agree.
works, right?
I'm
It's
just
not
curious
it's
what the
not like
percentages are.
Harvard has all the rock stars and Michigan has none, or Yale has all the rock stars and NYU or Columbia has none. That's just not how it works at
Oh, I
all.
agree, but that's not what I'm arguing. What I'm arguing is what, like, are we talking like 5 times as many, right? Does it get exponentially greater at the very top? Because of Pareto principle. In other words, 5% of the folks take 95% of the whatever, those opportunities, those big opportunities.
Well, I suppose Supreme Court justices, the answer is mostly yes, or it has been historically.
I'm not saying it's worth it. I'm just curious. It's an angle I hadn't thought about before with the networking. I'm My gut is still like go for free, go to a great
It's
school, do awesome, and work on networking.
well,
But
yeah. If that's the case, it surely only applies at the very, very, very top, which
very,
means
very,
it
very
just
top.
doesn't apply to 99% of our listeners.
Yep. But that's the
Yeah.
definition of the Pareto principle, right? Like even as soon as you slip out of that top, then it's all of a sudden it's like you're not much different than anybody else. Anyway,
Right. Right.
thank you, G. It's an interesting idea, but I don't think
I mean,
it's worth it.
you shouldn't assume ever that you're going to be the big fish. You're going to have to work your ass off no matter where you go to school. I can't imagine going to law school and just planning on finishing in the bottom of my class. That just seems, I mean, unless you're only there because your folks are rich and they want you to go to law school and you don't care, you don't have anything else going on in your life, and you're just like not serious about being a lawyer. But if you're serious about being a lawyer, I think you want to try to win the academic competition, at least finish in the top half of the academic competition at your school. Otherwise, you're losing already at the beginning of your legal career. You're just losing cases.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't, that just doesn't seem like something a lawyer would want to do.